What if I told you that the one thing holding you back from the life you actually want, the relationships, the career, the confidence, the peace, isn't your circumstances, your past, or your luck? What if I told you it's something happening right now inside your own head, approximately every 1.2 seconds? And what if I told you there's a fix, a real, practical, neuroscience-backed fix that doesn't require years of therapy, a meditation retreat in the mountains, or a complete personality overhaul? Here's what's true. Right now, as you're reading these words, your brain is producing somewhere between 60,000 and 80,000 thoughts today alone. That's not a metaphor. That's not an exaggeration. That's neuroscience. And here's the number that should stop you cold. Up to 80% of those thoughts are negative. Do the math with me for a second. That's up to 50,000 negative thoughts hitting your mental inbox every single day. 50,000. Before breakfast, during your commute, the middle of a conversation with someone you love, while you're trying to fall asleep at night and your brain decides it's the perfect time to replay every awkward thing you've ever said since 2009. No wonder you feel exhausted. No wonder you feel like you're running a race where the finish line keeps moving. No wonder you wake up some mornings and feel already behind before your feet hit the floor. But here's what nobody is telling you. And this is the part that changes everything. Those negative thoughts aren't random. They're not a character flaw. They're not proof that something is wrong with you. They are a system. And if negative thinking is a system, then here's the most liberating truth you'll hear today. It can be replaced with a better system. That's what this is, not a pep talk, not a collection of inspirational quotes you'll forget by Thursday. This is a complete, step-by-step mental operating system called the Reset Protocol. And by the time you finish reading, you'll have everything you need to stop negative thoughts from controlling your life, not someday. Starting with your next thought. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The prison you built without knowing it. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning. Your alarm goes off. And before you've even checked the time, before you've taken a single conscious breath, your brain is already running its morning program. I'm so tired. I didn't sleep well enough. Today's going to be hard. I have that thing I'm dreading. I haven't been doing enough. I'm already behind. Sound familiar? Here's what most people don't realize. That internal monologue isn't just annoying background noise. It's actually shaping your neurochemistry, your body language, your decision-making, and your entire emotional trajectory for the day. All before you've poured your first cup of coffee. This is what I call the silent sentence. A life being quietly shaped by thoughts you never consciously chose. And the most painful part? Most people don't even know they're living in it. They feel the heaviness, they feel the resistance, they feel the low-grade anxiety that hums underneath everything like a refrigerator that never turns off. But they chalk it up to personality, to stress, to just the way life is. They don't realize they're operating inside a mental prison with no visible bars, a prison built from thought patterns that have been reinforced so many times they feel like facts. Let's look at how this prison is constructed, because until you understand the architecture, you can't dismantle it. The three walls of the negative thought prison. Every person trapped in chronic negative thinking is held in place by three specific walls. These aren't abstract concepts. They're real, identifiable mental patterns that you can learn to see. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. The first wall, the automatic wall. These are the thoughts that arrive without your permission. You didn't send for them. You didn't create them consciously. They just show up, fully formed, like uninvited guests who somehow have a key to your house. You're in the middle of a perfectly normal Tuesday, and suddenly, what if I'm not good enough for this? What if they don't like me? What if I'm falling behind everyone else my age? You didn't decide to think those things. But there they are. And because they arrived without effort, they feel strangely credible, like your brain is delivering a news report rather than running an old, glitchy program. The automatic wall keeps you trapped because you believe these thoughts are yours in some deep, true sense. But they're not. They're patterns, conditioned responses, mental habits built over years of repetition. And habits, all habits, can be changed. The second wall, the amplification wall. One negative thought, left uninterrupted, never stays one negative thought. It multiplies. It cascades. It snowballs down a hill, picking up everything in its path. You miss a deadline at work leads to, I'm so disorganized, leads to, I've always been this way, leads to, I'm probably not cut out for this job, leads to, what am I even doing with my life? That's not dramatic. That's Tuesday afternoon for millions of people. One thought becomes 10. 10 become 50, and 50 thoughts deep. You're not even thinking about the deadline anymore. You're questioning your entire existence. The amplification wall is dangerous because of speed. Negative thoughts build momentum faster than positive ones. Your brain, for reasons we'll explore in the next chapter, is literally wired to let the negative escalate. Understanding why is the first step to stopping it. The third wall, the authority wall. This is the most insidious wall of all. At some point, you started treating your negative thoughts as if they were authoritative voices, as if they were telling you the truth about who you are, what you're capable of, and what you deserve. As if the critical voice in your head had somehow earned the right to be your judge, your jury, and your life coach. I can't handle this. Must be true. My brain said it. Nobody really gets me. Must be true. I feel it. I always mess things up. Must be true. It keeps coming up. But here's the thing about authority. It's given, not inherent. You gave your negative thoughts authority over your emotional life, which means you can take it back. The prison has 3 walls, and they're all made of the same material, repetition without examination. You thought certain thoughts so many times that they started to feel solid, real, permanent. But they're not. They never were. Why fighting your thoughts doesn't work. Here's where most people go wrong, and why most self-help advice about positive thinking eventually fails. They try to fight negative thoughts with willpower. They try to muscle their way into optimism. They repeat affirmations in the mirror that their nervous system flatly refuses to believe. They white-knuckle their way through a rough morning, telling themselves to think positive, while their brain quietly generates 300 more reasons why things might go sideways. It doesn't work. Not because you're weak, not because you lack discipline, but because you're fighting a system with a non-system. You can't defeat a sophisticated, automatic, neurologically reinforced mental pattern with a few minutes of forced positivity. That's like trying to hold back a flood with a paper towel. The flood isn't personal. It doesn't care how motivated you are. It's just following the path of least resistance, the one carved by years of repetition. To change a system, you need a better system. And that's exactly what the reset protocol is. R. Recognize E, examine S, stop E, exchange T. Transform 5 steps. backed by neuroscience, designed to work with your brain's actual architecture instead of fighting against it, and built to become automatic over time, so that eventually you're not consciously running the protocol at all. Your mind just does it. But before we get into the mechanics, you need to understand why your brain works against you in the first place. Because this isn't a character flaw, it's biology. And once you understand the biology, the whole thing stops feeling personal and starts feeling solvable. That's exactly what Chapter 2 is about. The hidden cost you're already paying. Before we move on, I want you to do something. I want you to think, genuinely think, about what chronic negative thinking has already cost you. Not emotionally, practically. What conversations haven't you started because you were convinced they'd go badly? What opportunities haven't you pursued because your inner voice talked you out of them before you even tried? What version of yourself have you not yet become because a thought, just a thought, convinced you it wasn't possible? This isn't about guilt. This is about clarity. Because the most important thing you can understand right now is this: the cost of staying where you are is not zero. Every day spent in the negative thought prison is a day you're not building the life you actually want. And the price compounds, quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. But here's the beautiful reversal waiting on the other side of this. Every cost is reversible. Every missed opportunity creates space for a better one. Every limitation you've accepted can be unaccepted. The moment you learn to stop negative thoughts, not suppress them, not ignore them, but genuinely, systematically stop them, you don't just feel better. You become capable of things that right now feel like they belong to someone else's life. That transformation starts in the next chapter. Why your brain is wired against you and how to rewire it. Let me ask you something that might reframe everything you think you know about yourself. Have you ever had a genuinely good day? Things going well, nothing catastrophically wrong, and still felt this low, quiet hum of unease? Like your brain was scanning the horizon for a problem that hadn't arrived yet? Like some part of you was just waiting for the other shoe to drop? That's not anxiety. That's not pessimism. That's not a sign that something is broken in you. That's evolution doing exactly what it was designed to do. And understanding this, really understanding it, not just intellectually, but in a way that lands, might be the single most compassionate thing you ever do for yourself. Because the moment you stop treating your negative thoughts as personal failures and start seeing them as ancient software running on modern hardware, everything changes. You stop fighting yourself. You start working with yourself. And that's when real change becomes possible. Your brain is 200,000 years old and doesn't know it. Here's the honest truth about your brain. The core emotional and threat detection architecture you're walking around with today was largely shaped by conditions that haven't existed for roughly 200,000 years. Your ancient ancestors lived in an environment where danger was constant, immediate, and physical. A shadow moving in the grass could mean a predator. An unfamiliar face could mean arrival from another tribe. A moment of inattention could genuinely mean death. In that world, the brain that survived was not the relaxed, optimistic brain. It was the vigilant brain, the suspicious brain, the brain that never fully switched off its threat detection system, even when nothing was wrong, because nothing is wrong right now, and nothing will go wrong in the next 60 seconds. Were two very different things. That brain got passed down. generation after generation, refined and reinforced through millennia of natural selection, until eventually it ended up inside your skull, sitting in your modern apartment, getting stressed about email. Neuroscientists call this the negativity bias, and it's not a flaw. It was, for a very long time, a feature. Your brain is literally wired to prioritize negative information over positive information. Threatening signals travel through your neural pathways faster than reassuring ones. Bad news gets processed more deeply and retained more durably than good news. Think about the last time someone gave you 5 genuine compliments and 1 piece of criticism. Which one did you lie awake thinking about at midnight? Exactly. That's not weakness. That's your negativity bias running the program it was built to run. The problem is the program was written for a world that no longer exists. The saber-toothed tiger in your inbox. Here's where it gets fascinating and frustrating. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and a psychological one. When your ancient ancestor heard a rustle in the bushes, their body flooded with stress chemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, preparing them to fight, flee, or freeze. That response was life-saving. When you open your inbox and see a message from your manager that says, "Can we talk?" your body floods with the exact same chemicals, same cascade, same physiological response, same ancient alarm system firing. Your brain treats a tense conversation the same way it treats a predator. It treats financial worry the same way it treats a physical attack. It treats social rejection the same way it treats being cast out from the tribe, which historically meant death. This is what I call the modern threat paradox. The mechanism that was designed to protect you is now the mechanism that exhausts you. The system that kept your ancestors alive is the system that keeps you awake at 2 a.m. replaying a meeting from 3 weeks ago. You're not neurotic. You're not weak. You're running a survival operating system in a world that mostly requires a completely different kind of software. And here's the thing about software. It can be updated. What chronic negative thinking does to your brain. Literally, this is where I want you to pay close attention. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't motivational language. It's biology. And it explains why negative thinking doesn't just feel bad. It actually changes you at a structural level. When you think a negative thought, your brain doesn't just experience a mood. It triggers a cascade of biochemical events throughout your entire body. Cortisol floods your system. Your blood pressure rises. Your immune function drops. Your digestion slows. Your body enters a state of physiological emergency. Even if you're just sitting at your desk, perfectly safe, thinking about a hypothetical problem that may never happen. Adrenaline creates that jittery, restless, can't quite settle feeling that you might have normalized as just being a busy person. Norepinephrine alters your brain chemistry in ways that make it harder to think clearly, harder to access creativity, and much easier to catastrophize. And then, this is the part that matters most, chronic exposure to these chemicals physically reshapes your brain. Research in neuroscience has shown that prolonged negative thinking patterns are associated with a smaller prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making, perspective-taking, and emotional regulation. Meanwhile, the amygdala, your brain's fear and threat center, actually grows under chronic stress. Let me translate that plainly. The more you think negatively, the better your brain gets at thinking negatively. It's not a metaphor. It's not self-help language. Your brain is literally building more efficient neural pathways for anxiety, self-doubt, and catastrophic thinking. Because that's what you've been training it to do. You're going to the gym every day, and the muscle you're building is fear. But, and this is the part that should make you feel something shift inside you, the exact same mechanism works in reverse. Neuroplasticity, your brain's most underused superpower. Neuroplasticity is one of the most important scientific discoveries of the last century, and it can be summarized in one sentence. Your brain changes based on what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. This isn't wishful thinking. This is demonstrated, replicated, peer-reviewed science. Your brain is not a fixed, static organ that was set at birth and slowly deteriorates. It is a living, dynamic, constantly adapting structure that is always in the process of being shaped by your habits, your attention, your thoughts, and your choices. What this means for you right now is profound. Every time you allow a negative thought to run unchallenged, you're slightly deepening the neural groove for that pattern. But every time you interrupt a negative thought, examine it and replace it with something more useful. You're slightly building a new groove, a new pathway, a new default. Do that enough times, consistently enough, and something remarkable happens. The new pathway becomes stronger than the old one. Your brain starts defaulting to the new pattern not because you're forcing it, but because that's now the path of least resistance. This is exactly why the reset protocol works, not as a temporary patch, but as a genuine rewiring tool. You're not just managing your symptoms, you're changing the physical structure of your own brain. You're not just feeling better temporarily, you're becoming, at a cellular level, a different thinker. And the timeline for that change? Faster than you probably believe. Research suggests that with consistent practice, measurable changes in neural pathways can begin to appear within 4 to 8 weeks, not years. Weeks. The stress paradox. You need to name. Before we move on, I want to give you one more concept that I think will be quietly revolutionary for you, especially if you're someone who has spent years trying to just think more positively and found it frustratingly unsustainable. Here it is. Trying to force positive thinking while your nervous system is in threat mode doesn't work, because your brain physically cannot access the neural networks associated with optimism and creativity when cortisol is dominating your system. Read that again. When you're in a state of chronic stress, which, if you're producing 50,000 negative thoughts a day, you almost certainly are, your brain's architecture literally limits your access to hopeful, creative, solution-oriented thinking. It's not a mindset problem. It's a neurological state problem. This is why people who tell themselves to just be positive usually fail. They're trying to think their way out of a biochemical state that actively blocks that kind of thinking. It's like trying to see in the dark by thinking about light really hard. What actually works is intervening at the level of the nervous system first, which is exactly what the physical components of the reset protocol are designed to do. You regulate your body. Your body shifts its chemistry. Your chemistry opens access to different neural networks. And then the new thoughts have somewhere to land. This isn't complicated once you understand it, but most people never understand it, which is why most people keep trying the same approach and getting the same results. You're not going to be most people. What changes when you understand your biology? Here's what I want you to take from this chapter, not as information, but as a felt shift in how you relate to yourself. You are not your negative thoughts. You are not broken, flawed, or fundamentally pessimistic because your brain generates negative content automatically. You are a human being with an ancient brain navigating a modern world, doing the best you can with hardware that was never updated for the environment you're actually living in. The negativity isn't your fault. The continuation of it, that part, is your responsibility, not your fault. Your responsibility. And those are very different things. Fault looks backward and assigns blame. Responsibility looks forward and identifies leverage. You now have both the knowledge and the leverage. You understand why your brain behaves the way it does. You know that change is biologically possible, not just psychologically possible, but neurologically possible, measurable, and real. And in the next chapter, we're going to get precise about what that change actually costs you when it doesn't happen. Because sometimes the most motivating thing isn't the vision of where you're going. It's the honest reckoning with where you'll stay if you don't move. What negative thinking is costing you right now, and why the bill keeps growing. I want to have an honest conversation with you for a moment. Not the kind of honest conversation where someone lists statistics at you and you nod along politely and then go back to your life unchanged. The kind of honest conversation where something actually lands, where you read a sentence and feel a quiet, uncomfortable recognition. The kind that precedes real change. Because here's what I've noticed about people who struggle with chronic negative thinking. They know it feels bad. They know it's draining. They know in some abstract sense that it's not good for them, but they've never actually done the full accounting. They've never sat down and looked clearly at the complete bill. Everything negative thinking has taken, is taking, and will continue to take until they stop it. So that's what we're going to do right now. Not to make you feel guilty, not to make you feel hopeless, but because clarity is the first condition of change. You cannot make a genuinely motivated decision to transform something until you fully understand what it's costing you to keep it. Let's look at the bill. The relationship tax negative thinking doesn't just live inside you. It radiates outward, and the people closest to you feel it first. Think about the last time you were deep in a mental spiral. Maybe it was a worry about work, a fear about the future, a loop of self-criticism that wouldn't quit. Now think about the people who were physically present with you during that time. Were you actually with them? Not physically, emotionally. Were you present in the conversation, or were you half absent, nodding, responding on autopilot while the real you was somewhere else entirely, 3 steps ahead in a catastrophic timeline that hadn't happened yet? This is what negative thinking does to your relationships. It creates what I call the presence gap, the distance between where your body is and where your mind actually is. And the people who love you feel that gap, even when they can't name it. Your partner notices that you're distracted. Your children sense that something is competing for your attention. Your friends feel the subtle withdrawal, the half engagement, the way you're there, but not quite there. Over time, the presence gap does something quietly devastating. It creates emotional distance in relationships that are supposed to be your closest ones. Not because anyone did anything wrong, not because the love isn't real, but because chronic mental absence is, functionally, a form of neglect. even when it's completely unintentional. And there's another layer to this. Negative thinking makes you hyperreactive. When your nervous system is already running at high alert, which it is if your brain is processing 50,000 negative signals a day, everything gets amplified. A small misunderstanding feels like a betrayal. A gentle piece of feedback feels like a personal attack. A minor disagreement feels like evidence that the whole relationship is fragile. You're not responding to what's actually happening. You're responding to what your threat-saturated nervous system interprets as happening, and those two things are often completely different. How many conversations have escalated unnecessarily because of this? How many moments of genuine connection have been missed because anxiety was louder than presence? How many relationships have been slowly worn down not by dramatic events, but by the quiet, constant friction of one person perpetually braced for the worst? This is the relationship tax. It's real, it's ongoing, and most people never realize they're paying it. The career ceiling you created. Let's talk about your professional life, because this is where negative thinking does some of its most efficient and least visible damage. Somewhere in your career, there are things you haven't done, opportunities you didn't pursue, conversations you didn't start, pitches you didn't make, projects you quietly talked yourself out of before anyone else even had a chance to weigh in. And if you're honest, really honest, most of those decisions had the same author. Not your circumstances, not bad timing, not lack of talent or skill or preparation. Your inner critic. The voice that runs the cost-benefit analysis of every bold move and always somehow finds more reasons not to than to. The voice that knows your history better than your potential. The voice that can construct a completely convincing case for staying small, staying safe, and staying exactly where you already are. I'm not talking about wise, measured caution. Thoughtful risk assessment is a genuinely useful skill. I'm talking about the pattern where you default to no, where the first response to anything that requires courage, visibility, or the possibility of failure is an automatic contraction rather than a considered expansion. That pattern has a name: fear-based decision architecture. And it's one of the most expensive things a person can operate with professionally. Think about what it looks like in practice. You have an idea in a meeting, a good one, you can feel it. But before you open your mouth, your brain runs a rapid-fire threat assessment. What if they think it's stupid? What if someone asks a question I can't answer? What if I say it wrong? And so you say nothing. Or you soften it so much that the original idea is barely recognizable. Or you wait until someone else says something similar and you nod along, thinking, I had that thought. Or there's the promotion you didn't apply for, not because you weren't qualified, but because a voice in your head, confident, authoritative, completely unchallenged, told you that you weren't ready yet, that you needed a bit more experience, that you should wait until you felt more certain. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about feeling certain. It's almost never what precedes bold professional moves. Most of the people who have taken the risks, started the ventures, said the bold things in the room, they weren't certain. They were scared and did it anyway. The difference between them and everyone else wasn't confidence. It was a slightly weaker inner critic. Negative thinking also kills creativity in a way that's almost mechanical. Your brain, when in threat mode, narrows its focus. It becomes hypervigilant, detail-oriented, risk-aware. These are useful states for avoiding danger. They are terrible states for generating ideas, seeing new angles, making unexpected connections. Creativity requires a sense of psychological safety, the felt sense that it's okay to be wrong, to be weird, to try something that might not work. Chronic negative thinking destroys that felt sense. It keeps your brain in a state of perpetual self-surveillance, where every thought is auditioned before it's allowed to exist. And in that environment, the most original, interesting, potentially transformative ideas never make it past the audition. The career ceiling you've been bumping against, in many cases, it's not made of glass. It's made of thought patterns. The health bill, nobody talks about this one, tends to surprise people because we're so accustomed to thinking of mental and physical health as separate categories. They're not. They never were. And the research on this connection is, at this point, overwhelming. Chronic negative thinking is a chronic stressor, and chronic stress has a well-documented list of physical consequences that reads like a catalog of conditions you definitely don't want. Elevated blood pressure, suppressed immune function, meaning you get sick more often, recover more slowly, and are more vulnerable to both acute infections and chronic illness. Disrupted sleep architecture, which cascades into impaired memory consolidation, reduced emotional regulation, and decreased cognitive performance. Elevated inflammatory markers, which are associated with everything from cardiovascular disease to accelerated cognitive aging. Digestive disruption, chronic muscular tension, hormonal imbalances. And then there's the one that I think hits hardest when people really sit with it: premature aging at the cellular level. Research into telomere length, the protective caps on your chromosomes that serve as a biological marker of cellular aging, has found that chronic psychological stress is associated with shorter telomeres. In plain language, chronic negative thinking may literally be aging your cells faster than your chronological age would predict. You are not just feeling worse. You are, in a measurable biological sense, aging faster. I'm not sharing this to frighten you. I'm sharing it because I think most people, when they decide whether or not to take their mental patterns seriously, are calculating the cost in emotional terms. Do I feel bad enough to change? But the physical cost is just as real, just as measurable, and just as urgent. Your thoughts are not contained inside your head. They are biochemical events that affect every system in your body every day. The good news, and there is genuinely good news here, is that the same neuroplasticity that makes negative thinking so physically damaging also makes the reversal possible. Studies on stress reduction and positive psychology interventions have shown measurable improvements in immune function, blood pressure, sleep quality, and even telomere length. The body responds to a healthier mental environment. It heals. It recalibrates. It starts functioning the way it was designed to function when it's not perpetually in emergency mode. Your biology isn't your destiny. It's your current default. And defaults can be changed. The time theft. You haven't calculated, here's the cost that I think is most invisible, and in some ways, most devastating. Time. Not just the time you spend actively worrying. That would be bad enough. But also the time you spend recovering from worry. The hours after an anxiety spiral where you feel depleted, flat, slightly hollowed out. The time you spend paralyzed by indecision because your negative thoughts have convinced you that every option is potentially catastrophic. The time you spend second-guessing choices you've already made, the time you spend in conversations while mentally rehearsing other conversations, the time you spend physically present in your life while mentally absent from it. Add it up honestly. How many hours per week does your negative thinking actually consume? Not just the acute episodes, but the full ripple effect. For most people, when they do this accounting honestly, the number is shocking. Not minutes, hours, sometimes many hours, every single week. Week after week, year after year. Now multiply that by the years you've already been living this way, and then ask yourself, what would I have created, built, experienced, or become with that time if it hadn't been consumed by mental noise I never chose? I'm not asking that to generate regret. Regret is just negative thinking with a historical focus. It uses the same energy, serves the same prison, and changes exactly nothing. I'm asking it to generate motivation grounded in reality, because sometimes the most powerful fuel for change isn't the excitement of where you're going. It's the clear-eyed recognition of what staying where you are will continue to cost you. In time, in relationships, in health, in the career you keep almost having, in the life you keep almost living. The bill is real. It's already been accumulating, and it will keep accumulating quietly, invisibly, relentlessly, until you put a different system in place. That system is coming. Right now, in the next chapter, we're going to open the actual toolkit, the reset protocol in full detail, and you're going to understand step by step exactly how to stop negative thoughts, not by fighting them, but by doing something far more effective. You're going to learn how to make them irrelevant. Your complete step-by-step system for stopping negative thoughts, starting right now. Okay, this is the chapter you came for. Everything up to this point, the biology, the cost accounting, the architecture of the prison, that was all necessary groundwork. You needed to understand why negative thinking works the way it does before you could understand how to dismantle it effectively. You needed the map before you could navigate the territory. But now we're done with the map. Now we're walking. The reset protocol is a 5-step system, not a philosophy, not a mindset, not a vague suggestion to think more positively. It's a specific, sequential, repeatable process that you can apply in real time, in the middle of real situations, with real negative thoughts. Each step has a clear purpose. Each step builds on the one before it. And together, they don't just manage negative thinking. They systematically dismantle the patterns that make negative thinking automatic in first place. Let's go through each step with the depth it deserves. R. Recognize the master key that unlocks everything else. Here's a truth that sounds simple, but has genuinely profound implications. You cannot change a thought you haven't noticed. Most negative thoughts operate below the threshold of conscious awareness. They're not announced. They don't arrive with a warning label that says, "Attention, unhelpful thought incoming." They slip in through the side door, dressed as facts, disguised as reasonable concerns, masquerading as careful planning. And before you've consciously registered their presence, they've already begun affecting your mood, your body, and your behavior. This is why recognition isn't just the first step. It's the foundational step. Without it, all the other tools in this protocol have nothing to work with. But recognition is more nuanced than most people realize. There are actually 3 distinct levels of it, and developing all 3 will give you a degree of mental self-awareness that most people never achieve. Level 1. Surface recognition. This is where you start. Simply noticing when a negative thought is present. Not judging it, not analyzing it, not trying to stop it yet, just seeing it. The challenge here is that your brain has become so accustomed to running negative patterns that they no longer feel like thoughts. They feel like reality. When you think I'm not capable enough for this, it doesn't announce itself as a thought about your capability. It just feels like a fact about the world. The line between I'm thinking something and this is true has completely dissolved. Surface recognition is the practice of redrawing that line. One of the most effective ways to develop surface recognition is through your body. Negative thoughts almost always create physical signatures before they're fully conscious. Your shoulders creep up toward your ears. Your jaw tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow and high in your chest. Your stomach develops that familiar low-grade unease. These physical signals are often faster and more reliable indicators of negative thinking than trying to monitor your thoughts directly. Your body knows before your conscious mind does. Learn to read it. Pay attention also to your emotional tone, that subtle background feeling that colors everything. Anxiety has an early signature of slight unease before it becomes full worry. Sadness begins as a gentle heaviness before it becomes depression. Anger starts as minor irritation before it becomes reactive fury. The earlier you catch these signals, the smaller the fire you're dealing with. A spark is easy to extinguish. A blaze requires a fire department. Level 2. Pattern recognition. This is where recognition becomes genuinely powerful, because your negative thoughts aren't random. They have structure, they have triggers, they have favorite themes they return to again and again. Start paying attention to the architecture of your negative thinking. What situations consistently activate negative thoughts for you? Is it certain types of conversations? Checking your phone first thing in the morning? Being around specific people? Facing particular kinds of tasks? What are your recurring negative thought themes? Most people, when they examine honestly, have 3 to 5 core negative narratives that account for the vast majority of their mental suffering. Things like, I'm not good enough. I'm going to fail. Nobody really understands me. I always mess things up. I'm falling behind where I should be. What are your temporal patterns? Are you more vulnerable to negative thinking in the morning or evening? Do Sunday nights carry a particular weight of anxiety about the week ahead? Do certain times of year reliably bring certain mental patterns? Once you've mapped your patterns, you gain something invaluable: predictability. You know when you're most vulnerable. You can be more vigilant during those windows. You can even begin to prepare in advance, which brings us to the third level. Level 3. Predictive recognition. This is the advanced skill, the one that, once developed, makes you feel like you have a kind of mental superpower. At this level, you become sensitive enough to your own mental patterns that you can sense a negative thought forming before it fully arrives in consciousness. Just as you can feel a sneeze building before it happens, you can feel the energetic preconditions of a negative thought, a slight shift in your body, a subtle change in your breathing, a micro-adjustment in your posture, before the thought has fully crystallized. This takes time to develop. It requires what I call mental mindfulness, not the sitting cross-legged in total silence kind, but the quality of sustained, curious self-attention that you can carry into ordinary life. Several times throughout your day, pause for just 10 seconds and ask yourself, what's the weather like in my mind right now? Not good or bad, not positive or negative, just what's the current atmospheric condition? Are there storm clouds forming? Is there a shift in pressure? Any early warning signs of turbulence? The more consistently you practice this mental weather check, the more sensitive you become to the subtle micro shifts that precede negative thinking. And at that point, you're no longer just responding to negative thoughts. You're preventing them. Prevention is always more efficient than cure. E. Examine becoming the detective of your own mind. Once you recognize that a negative thought is present, the instinctive response for most people is one of two things. Either get swept into it or try to push it away. Both of these strategies fail. Engagement feeds it. Resistance strengthens it. The reset protocol does something different. It examines. Think of yourself as a detective arriving at a scene. A good detective doesn't show up with predetermined conclusions. They don't get emotionally invested in the evidence. They observe, gather information, and analyze with neutral curiosity. This is exactly the energy you bring to examining your negative thoughts. You have 5 examination tools. Use them in sequence or selectively, depending on how much time and mental space you have in the moment. Tool 1. The Truth Test. Ask yourself one direct question. Is this thought based on facts or fears? This single question, asked honestly, dissolves the majority of negative thoughts immediately, because most of them, when examined, are not reporting on what's actually happening. They're predicting what might happen based on fears dressed up as evidence. I'm going to fail this. Is that a fact? What's the actual evidence? The fact might be you have a challenging task ahead and you feel underprepared. The fear is the addition. Therefore, failure is the likely outcome. Those are two completely different things. The fact is neutral. The fear is a story. Separate them. And watch how much smaller the fear looks when it's no longer wearing the costume of fact. Tool 2. The Helpfulness Assessment. Even if a negative thought contains some factual element, ask, is thinking this thought actually helping me? Is it moving you toward a solution or away from one? Is it generating useful information or just draining energy? Is it a productive concern that points toward action, or is it rumination dressed up as planning? A helpful response to a real problem looks like, I notice I'm underprepared for this. I'll spend 30 minutes tonight getting ready. That's actionable. That moves things forward. An unhelpful response to the same situation looks like spending the next 4 hours mentally rehearsing every possible way things could go wrong, feeling progressively worse, taking zero concrete action, and ending the day more anxious than you started. Same situation, completely different mental response. Only one of them is actually useful. Tool 3. The 5-year test. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? Will I even remember this situation in 5 years? I want to be honest with you. This question is almost unfairly effective, because most of the things we consume enormous mental energy worrying about are, in the grand arc of a life, genuinely minor, not unimportant, but not 5-year problems, not life-defining moments, just difficult patches on a long road. When you apply the 5-year test, you're not dismissing your current experience, you're putting it in accurate proportion. And proportion is the antidote to catastrophizing. The test also works in reverse. If I don't address this, where will I be in 5 years? For the things that genuinely matter, your health, your relationships, your direction, this reverse version creates a different kind of useful urgency, not anxiety, clarity. Tool 4. The evidence evaluation. When a negative thought makes a claim about you, other people, or the world, demand evidence, not assumptions, not possibilities, not feelings. Actual concrete evidence. Nobody likes me. Okay. What's the evidence? Has every person you've ever met explicitly stated they dislike you? When you examine it honestly, the evidence is usually a few isolated incidents, selectively recalled, while the contradicting evidence, the people who choose your company, the friendships that have lasted, the moments of genuine connection, is being systematically ignored. This isn't positive spin. This is accurate accounting. Your negative thoughts are cherry-picking the data. The evidence evaluation asks you to look at the full picture. Tool 5. The alternative explanation exercise. For any negative interpretation of events, generate at least 3 alternative explanations that are equally plausible. Someone didn't respond to your message. Negative default. They're angry with me. They're pulling away. Alternative explanations. They're genuinely busy. They saw it and meant to reply later. They're dealing with something personal that has nothing to do with you. Their phone is dead. They're waiting until they have more time to give a thoughtful response. All of these are equally valid. Only one of them, the negative default, creates suffering. And you chose it not because the evidence supported it, but because your brain defaulted to threat interpretation. The alternative explanation exercise trains you to notice that default and consciously widen your interpretive lens. S. Stop, the circuit breaker technique. This is the step most people misunderstand, and misunderstanding it is exactly why most attempts to stop negative thinking fail spectacularly. You cannot stop a negative thought by fighting it. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience. When you resist a thought, when you try to push it away, suppress it, or muscle past it with willpower, you give it more neural activation, not less. You're essentially shining a spotlight on exactly what you're trying to avoid. Remember, tell someone not to think about a yellow submarine, and the first thing that appears in their mind is a yellow submarine. Your brain doesn't process the word don't. It only processes the object. The reset protocol doesn't fight negative thoughts. It interrupts them. 3 components applied in sequence. The stop command. The moment you've recognized and briefly examined a negative thought, you give your mind a firm, specific, verbal instruction, either out loud or silently. Stop. Reset. Now. Not pleadingly, not hopefully. With the same calm authority you'd use to stop someone from walking into traffic. Direct, decisive, non-negotiable. Use exactly these 3 words every time. The consistency matters because you're building a conditioned response. Over time, stop, reset, now becomes a neurological trigger that your brain learns to associate with a specific state shift. The repetition is the mechanism. This works because it activates what neuroscientists call prefrontal override, your executive brain asserting conscious control over the automatic pattern generated by older brain regions. It's not magic. It's architecture. You're using one part of your brain to interrupt another. The physical reset. Negative thoughts don't just exist in your mind. They exist in your body, in the tension patterns, the breathing changes, the postural shifts that accompany them. To fully interrupt a negative thought, you have to interrupt it at the body level too. The most effective physical reset is what I call the power breath. Immediately after the stop command, take one slow breath in through your nose, hold for 3 seconds, and release forcefully through your mouth with an audible exhale. Not a delicate sigh, a real release. This single breath does something specific. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the physiological counterpart of the stress response, and creates an immediate measurable shift in your body's chemical state. It's not symbolic, it's biochemical. You can also use other physical resets, rolling your shoulders back firmly, shaking your hands vigorously for 5 seconds, standing up, and taking 3 deliberate steps. The key is choosing one specific action and using it consistently, so it becomes woven into your automatic pattern interrupt sequence. The attention redirect. Immediately after the physical reset, redirect your attention to something specific and concrete in your immediate sensory environment. Not a positive thought yet. That comes next. Just something neutral and present. The most reliable technique here is the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method. Identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can physically touch right now, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. This exercise is deceptively powerful. It works because it occupies your conscious attention with present moment sensory input, which is neurologically incompatible with the abstract, future-focused, threat-oriented processing that characterizes negative thinking. You literally cannot be fully grounded in present sensory reality and simultaneously running a catastrophic mental simulation. Your attention can only be in one place. Give it that one place deliberately every time. A. Exchange trading. Mental poison for mental medicine. Here's where most people make a critical mistake when they try to apply positive thinking principles. They attempt to replace negative thoughts with thoughts that are positive but unbelievable. I'm going to fail leads to I'm amazing and everything will be perfect. Your brain rejects this immediately. It knows the difference between a genuine thought and a performance. And when you try to force a thought, your nervous system doesn't believe. It doesn't just fail to help. It actually reinforces cynicism about the whole process. You tried positive thinking and it felt fake, so you concluded positive thinking doesn't work. But it wasn't positive thinking that failed. It was unbelievable positive thinking. The exchange step isn't about fake positivity. It's about powerful thinking. Thoughts that are both genuinely empowering and genuinely believable. Realistic optimism rather than delusional cheerfulness. Your exchange thoughts should come from one of 5 categories, what I call the 5 pillars of mental strength. Pillar 1, growth orientation. Instead of fixed limitation thoughts, you choose development thoughts. I'm not good at this leads to I'm in the process of getting better at this. I always mess up relationships leads to I'm learning what I need to build healthier connections. Growth orientation thoughts are always true because you are always, by definition, capable of learning. They redirect your focus from current limitations to future possibilities. Pillar 2, resource focus. Instead of scarcity thoughts, you choose abundance thoughts. I don't have enough time leads to I'll use my time with intention. I don't know how to do this. I'll find out what I need to know. Resource focus, shift your mental lens from what's missing to what's available. And when you focus on your resources, your skills, your relationships, your creativity, your capacity to learn, you feel more capable. Feeling more capable leads to acting more capable. Acting more capable produces better outcomes. The cycle is real. Pillar 3, action orientation. Instead of paralysis thoughts, you choose movement thoughts. This is too overwhelming. I'll take one specific next step. I don't know where to begin. I'll begin with what I can control right now. Action-oriented thoughts break the spell of overwhelm by making the next step concrete and small. You're not climbing the whole mountain. You're taking one step. One step is always manageable. Pillar 4, present moment focus. Instead of past regret or future fear thoughts, you choose now thoughts. I always screw everything up right now. I'm focused and capable. What if it all falls apart? Right now, I'm handling what's in front of me. Present focused thoughts are particularly powerful because the present moment is the only time frame in which you have any actual agency. You cannot act in the past. You cannot act in the future. You can only act now. Thoughts that bring you into now give you your power back. Pillar 5, purpose, connection. Instead of meaninglessness thoughts, you choose significance thoughts. This is pointless. This is preparing me for something that matters. Why is this happening to me? What can I learn from this experience? Purpose connection transforms obstacles into data. When current difficulty is connected to future growth, persistence becomes possible where it previously wasn't. Building your exchange. Thought library. Here's a practical instruction that will significantly increase your success with this step. Create your exchange thoughts in advance, not in the middle of a negative spiral, when your prefrontal cortex is partially offline and your nervous system is in threat mode. Do it now. While you're calm and clear-headed, identify your 5 most frequent negative thought patterns, the ones that show up most reliably in the situations you know best. Then craft one specific exchange thought for each one, drawn from the 5 pillars. Write them down. Put them somewhere accessible. Review them in the morning so they're primed and ready. When the negative thought arrives, and it will, you won't be searching for a response. You'll already have one waiting. T. Transform. Making the new thought stick. Permanently. This is the step that separates temporary relief from lasting rewiring. And it's the step most people never take, which is why most people experience the same negative thought patterns, cycling back again and again even after they've dealt with them. Exchanging a negative thought for a positive one is necessary, but it's not sufficient. For the new thought to take root, for it to become a genuine neural pathway rather than a briefly visited idea, it needs to be anchored at multiple levels simultaneously. This is the live formula L, linguistic programming. Enhance your exchange thought with language that encodes identity rather than intention. I'm trying to be more confident leads to I am becoming more confident every day. I hope I can handle this leads to I am fully capable of handling this. The shift from trying/hoping to being/becoming is not cosmetic. It changes the relationship between the thought and your sense of self. Your subconscious mind is always working to make your behavior consistent with your identity. When you think of yourself as someone who is becoming confident, you start behaving in ways that are consistent with that identity. The thought shapes the self-concept. The self-concept shapes the behavior. The behavior produces the evidence. The evidence reinforces the thought. The cycle runs in whichever direction you set it. I. Imagery activation. Pair your exchange thought with a specific, vivid mental image. Your brain processes visual information faster and more durably than verbal information. When you combine a linguistic thought with a detailed mental image, you create something your mind finds genuinely compelling, something that feels real rather than theoretical. Don't just think the exchange thought. See it. See yourself in a specific environment, doing the specific thing with the specific feeling that accompanies mastery or competence or peace. Make it multisensory. What do you hear? What do you feel physically? What are the expressions on people's faces? What emotions are moving through you? The more vivid and specific, the more real it becomes to your nervous system. And your nervous system doesn't sharply distinguish between something vividly imagined and something actually experienced. This is the mechanism behind every elite athlete's visualization practice. It works. V. Visceral engagement. Feel the exchange thought in your body. Where do you feel expansion when you think this new thought? Where does your body relax? What sensation arises? Warmth in your chest, lightness in your shoulders, steadiness in your core. Whatever it is, pay attention to it. Breathe into it. Let it amplify. Your body is not just a passenger in this process. It's a co-creator. When you anchor a new thought in physical sensation, you're encoding it in your nervous system at a deeper level than cognition alone can reach. E. Energetic embodiment. Express the new thought through movement and posture. Your body language doesn't just reflect your mental state, it influences it. This is called embodied cognition, and it's one of the more fascinating and well-replicated findings in psychology. How you hold your body sends feedback to your brain about who you are in this moment. After running L, I, and V, stand up straighter. Roll your shoulders back. Take a deep, deliberate breath and let your chest expand. Maybe take 3 confident steps forward. Maybe smile. Not a performed smile, but a genuine, slightly too wide grin that your nervous system can't quite help but respond to. This physical claiming tells your brain the new thought is real. The new identity is real. We're embodying it now. And your brain obligingly starts building the architecture to support it. The complete transform sequence takes 60 to 90 seconds. That's it. 1 to 1.5 minutes applied consistently every time a negative thought arises. And here's what happens over time. The new pathways get stronger. The old ones get weaker through disuse. And one day, sooner than you expect, you notice that the negative thought arose and something in you automatically redirected it. You didn't have to consciously run the protocol. Your brain just did it. That's when you know the rewiring is real. The complete guide to handling every kind of negative thinking and the life waiting on the other side. Part 1. The Sophisticated Enemy. Advanced Negative Thought Patterns. You've now got the full reset protocol. You understand the biology. You've done the cost accounting. You have a practical, repeatable system for interrupting and replacing negative thinking in real time. But here's something I want to be honest with you about. Some negative thoughts are sneaky, not the obvious ones, the straightforward I'm going to fail or nobody likes me variety, that your recognition skills will catch relatively quickly. I'm talking about the sophisticated ones, the ones that have evolved specifically to bypass your conscious detection systems. The ones that disguise themselves as logic, wisdom, self-awareness, or even positivity. These are the mental viruses that know how to wear a disguise. And until you can recognize them in their disguised forms, they'll continue slipping through your defenses, not loudly, but quietly and persistently, doing their damage below the surface. Let's expose them. Pattern 1. Logical negativity. This is the one that catches intelligent, self-aware people most effectively because it sounds so reasonable. Logical negativity doesn't say everything is going to fall apart. It says things like, I should probably think through all the ways this could go wrong, so I'm prepared. It doesn't say I'm worthless. It says, I want to be realistic about my current limitations. It doesn't say everything is hopeless. It says, I just don't want to get my hopes up and be disappointed. Every one of those thoughts contains a kernel of genuine wisdom. It is useful to consider potential challenges. It is wise to have realistic self-knowledge. It is emotionally protective to manage expectations. The problem isn't the thought content. The problem is the proportion. When preparing for potential problems consumes more mental energy than preparing for potential success. When your attention is chronically weighted toward what could go wrong rather than what could go right. You've crossed the line from prudent planning into what is functionally just anxiety, with better vocabulary. To handle logical negativity, apply what I call the proportion test. What percentage of my mental energy today went toward problems versus solutions? Toward limitations versus possibilities? Toward failure scenarios versus success scenarios? If more than 30% of your mental bandwidth is consistently occupied by negative scenarios, even logical, reasonable-sounding ones, you're dealing with logical negativity. The solution isn't to stop thinking about challenges entirely. It's to deliberately, consciously balance every problem-focused thought with an equal or greater solution-focused thought, not as positive spin, as accurate accounting of the full picture. Pattern 2. Disguised negativity. These are thoughts that sound positive on the surface, but carry hidden negative assumptions underneath, like a gift box with something unpleasant inside. At least, I'm not as bad as sounds like gratitude actually reinforces scarcity and comparison thinking. Maybe if I just work hard enough, I'll finally be good enough. Sounds motivational, actually encodes the assumption that you are currently inadequate. I'm lucky this worked out. Sounds appreciative, actually implies your outcomes are outside your control, that success happened to you rather than because of you. The way to detect disguised negativity is to look past the surface tone and ask, what does this thought assume about me? What belief about your capability, your worth, or your agency is embedded in the phrasing? If the underlying assumption is disempowering, even if the surface sounds fine, it's a negative thought wearing a positive costume. Treat it accordingly. Pattern 3. Worry disguised as planning. This one is particularly common among driven, high-achieving people because it mimics a genuinely productive behavior so closely. Here's the distinction that matters. Real planning is time-limited, solution-focused, and produces specific actions. Worry disguised as planning is open-ended, problem-focused, and produces more worry. Real planning sounds like, I have a difficult conversation coming up. Let me think through what I want to say and how I want to handle it, okay? I'll lead with curiosity, stay calm, and focus on the outcome I want. Good. Done. Worry disguised as planning sounds like, I have a difficult conversation coming up. What if they react badly? What if I say the wrong thing? What if they get defensive? What if this damages the relationship permanently? What if... Same trigger, completely different cognitive activity. One resolves, the other spirals. If you find yourself returning to the same scenario repeatedly, spending more than 20 minutes on any single planning session, or finishing a planning session feeling more anxious than when you started, you're not planning, you're worrying. Apply the reset protocol and exchange the spiral for one concrete next action. Pattern 4. Comparative negativity. Social media has made this one epidemic, but it existed long before anyone had a profile picture. Comparative negativity is the pattern of measuring your internal experience against other people's external presentation. And that comparison is structurally, inherently unfair because you have full access to your own doubts, fears, struggles, and failures while you only see the curated highlight reel of everyone else's life. You're comparing your behind-the-scenes footage to their promotional trailer and then wondering why you come up short. Everyone else seems to have it figured out. They don't. They have the same internal chaos you do. They've just learned to present differently. I should be further along by now. Further along than whom? Compared to what? Timeline. Established by whose authority? Other people don't struggle with this the way I do. They absolutely do. They just don't announce it. The antidote to comparative negativity is what I call full spectrum awareness. Deliberately reminding yourself that you're seeing a fraction of other people's complete experience. Every person you're comparing yourself to has a version of the voice you have, has the 3 a.m. doubt, has the days where nothing feels like enough, has the gap between who they are and who they want to be. You're not uniquely struggling. You're universally human. Pattern 5. Historical negativity. Your brain is an extraordinary pattern recognition machine. And one of the patterns it loves to recognize is this is like something that went badly before. Therefore, it will go badly again. Historical negativity uses your past as a crystal ball. I've never been good at this type of thing. I always mess up in situations like this. Every time I try something new, it doesn't work out. The problem isn't that your history is irrelevant. It's that historical negativity makes two specific errors. First, it assumes that past patterns must continue into the future, regardless of what you've learned, how you've grown, or what's changed about your circumstances. Second, it applies extreme selective memory, automatically retrieving failures and setbacks while systematically overlooking the successes, the growth, the times you surprised yourself, the challenges you navigated better than you expected. To interrupt historical negativity, practice selective history rebalancing. When your mind reaches for a past failure as evidence, deliberately counter it with an equally specific past success, not to erase the failure, but to give your brain a more accurate data set to work with. And then ask yourself the question that reframes everything. What's different about me now compared to then? Because something always is. You have more experience, more self-knowledge, more tools. The person facing this challenge today is not the same person who faced a similar one in the past. Don't let your brain pretend otherwise. Pattern 6. Perfectionist negativity. If I can't do this perfectly, it's not worth doing. I made one mistake, so the whole thing is ruined. I should be able to handle this without any difficulty. Perfectionist negativity is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of how human growth actually works. Growth is not linear. It is not clean. It does not proceed from competence to greater competence in a smooth, uninterrupted arc. Growth is messy, iterative, embarrassing, and full of mistakes. The mistake is not evidence of failure. It is the mechanism of improvement. Every person who has ever become genuinely skilled at anything has a long history of not being skilled at it. That's not a bug in the process. That's the process. The replacement for perfectionist thinking isn't low standards. It's excellence thinking. The orientation that says, I want to do my best, and my best will vary depending on circumstances, experience, and current capacity. I'm focused on improvement, not flawlessness. Progress, not perfection. Excellence thinking keeps you moving. Perfectionist thinking keeps you frozen, waiting for conditions that will never arrive, holding yourself to standards that serve paralysis rather than growth. Part 2. Emergency protocols. When negative thoughts feel overwhelming, everything we've covered so far is designed for regular use. The daily practice of catching, examining, interrupting, and replacing negative thoughts as they arise in normal life circumstances. But sometimes, life isn't normal. Sometimes the anxiety feels like a wave that's already broken over you before you had a chance to see it coming. Sometimes the mental noise becomes so loud and so fast that no protocol feels accessible. Sometimes you're not managing negative thoughts. You're drowning in them. These moments require a different approach, not your regular reset practice, your emergency protocols, designed for crisis situations, designed for when your nervous system is flooded and your usual mental tools feel like they're out of reach. Emergency Protocol 1. The Life Preserver. When you're overwhelmed, you don't try to swim to shore immediately. You grab something that keeps you afloat first. Then you navigate. 3 steps in this order. Every time. Ground. Place both feet flat on the floor and press down firmly. Put your hands on a solid surface, a table, a wall, your own thighs, and feel the texture and temperature. Look around the room and name 5 objects out loud in a normal speaking voice. You're anchoring yourself in physical reality, which is the antidote to the abstract mental spiral pulling you under. Breathe. Don't attempt complex breathing patterns when you're in crisis. Your stressed brain won't execute them reliably. Just this. Breathe in slowly through your nose. Hold for 3 seconds. Breathe out slowly through your mouth. Count each exhale out loud. Do it 10 times. The counting occupies your conscious mind with something simple and concrete. The slow exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system. Together, they begin to lower the physiological intensity of the crisis. Focus. Direct your attention to something immediate, specific, and neutral, not positive. That's too large a leap when you're overwhelmed. Neutral. Count backwards from 100 by 7s. Describe everything in the room you're in with as much detail as possible. Recite something you've memorized. Lyrics, a speech, a list you know by heart. The goal is to occupy your conscious attention with something that requires focus but doesn't trigger emotion. Stabilize first. Navigate second, always in that order. Emergency Protocol 2. The Circuit Overload Reset. Sometimes the overwhelm isn't one big wave. It's a torrential flood of thoughts coming so fast and so intensely that you can't isolate individual patterns to interrupt. Everything is chaos. Nothing is distinguishable. You're not having one negative thought. You're having approximately 40 simultaneously. When this happens, Don't try to apply the reset protocol to individual thoughts. There's nothing individual enough to grab. Instead, use what I call the mental whiteout. Find a quiet space if you can. Close your eyes. Visualize a completely white screen, blank, empty, pure white, and imagine your thoughts as words or images that appear on that screen and immediately fade. You're not stopping the thoughts. You're not engaging with them. You're just watching them appear and disappear on the white screen without following any of them. If visualization doesn't work for you in that moment, try sensory saturation instead. Choose one sense and flood it with neutral input. Put on music and focus exclusively on the sound, not the meaning of the lyrics, just the acoustic, texture. Hold an ice cube and focus only on the physical sensation in your hand. Look at a simple, repetitive visual pattern, a tiled floor, a textured wall, and focus only on what you see. The goal of both techniques is the same, to give your brain something so immediate and sensory specific to process that the thought flood has nowhere to gain traction. You're not fighting the chaos. You're redirecting the bandwidth. Emergency Protocol 3. Emotional Triage. Sometimes, overwhelming negative thoughts arrive with overwhelming emotions. Panic, rage, despair, grief. And when emotions are flooding your system, mental techniques alone are insufficient. You need to address the emotional state as its own urgent situation. Emotional triage means identifying the dominant emotion and applying the specific intervention designed for it. For panic, use the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique intensively. Spend at least 30 seconds on each sense. Slow everything down deliberately. Panic is characterized by a racing, catastrophizing, forward-projecting mental state. Grounding it in present-moment sensory experience interrupts the physiological spiral at its source. For rage, use physical discharge safely. Jumping jacks, push-ups, running in place for 60 seconds, hitting a pillow, shouting into a cushion. The intense physical energy of anger needs a physical outlet. Without that outlet, it simply intensifies. Once the physical intensity has subsided, the mental techniques become accessible again. For despair, use connection and perspective. Reach out to someone you trust, a friend, a family member, a therapist. Tell them simply, "I'm having a hard time right now." You don't need to explain everything, you just need to break the isolation. Despair is one of the few emotional states that genuinely worsens in solitude. Connection, even brief, even imperfect, interrupts it. And remind yourself, gently but clearly, this feeling is intense. It is not permanent. I have felt differently before. I will feel differently again, not as dismissal, as accurate information about the nature of emotional states. Emergency Protocol 4. Strategic Retreat. Sometimes the most intelligent response to an overwhelming situation is a temporary, deliberate withdrawal. Not avoidance, not denial. Strategic disengagement, removing yourself from the inputs that are intensifying the negative spiral so you can rebuild your mental resources before re-engaging. If you're on social media and spiraling into comparison and self-doubt, put the phone down. Not forever. Just now. If you're in a conversation that's escalating your anxiety or anger beyond your current capacity to regulate, excuse yourself. "I need a few minutes." That's enough. You don't owe anyone an explanation for taking care of your mental state. If you're in an environment that's overwhelming your nervous system, find a quieter space. Even 5 minutes of reduced stimulation can meaningfully shift your physiological state. Strategic retreat also means temporarily adjusting your expectations for yourself during hard periods. If you're in a genuine mental health crisis, today is not the day to tackle your hardest challenges or make your most consequential decisions. Give yourself permission to do what is necessary and focus on basic self-care. Sleep, hydration, movement, human contact, the foundations. You're not giving up. You're restoring capacity. There's a profound difference. Part 3. Building long-term mental immunity. Everything we've covered so far is designed to help you respond to negative thinking effectively. But the ultimate goal, the destination this whole journey is pointing toward, is something larger than effective response. It's mental immunity. Mental immunity is when your mental environment becomes so consistently healthy that negative thoughts can't establish residence. They may visit occasionally. They're a normal feature of human consciousness, and they always will be. But they don't move in. They don't take over. They don't define your days or determine your choices. They arrive, they're noticed, they're briefly examined, and they dissipate naturally without drama, without consuming hours of your energy. Building this kind of mental immunity requires attention to 5 foundational elements. Think of them as the conditions that make mental health not just something you manage, but something you inhabit. Foundation 1, mental nutrition. Your mind, like your body, is shaped by what you regularly consume, and most people have never done an honest audit of their mental diet. Spend 1 week tracking everything you consume mentally, not just media, conversations too, social media scrolls, the news, the podcasts you have listened to, the conversations that leave you feeling energized versus depleted, the content that makes you feel more capable and more hopeful versus more anxious and more cynical. You will likely notice patterns that surprise you, sources of information that you consume out of habit, but that consistently leave you feeling worse. Conversations that you participate in out of obligation, but that reliably activate your most negative thought patterns. Environments, digital and physical, that quietly amplify stress and comparison rather than growth and inspiration. The goal isn't to retreat into an information bubble where only positive things exist. That's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is intentional curation, increasing your consumption of content that genuinely expands your thinking, your capabilities, and your sense of what's possible, while decreasing content that merely feeds anxiety, comparison, and cynicism. Your mental diet is not a minor factor. It is a primary input into the quality of your thinking every single day. Foundation 2, cognitive strength training. Just as your physical health requires regular exercise, your mental health requires regular, deliberate practice of cognitive skills that build resilience. Gratitude practice, done well, is not about forcing positivity. It's about training your brain's attention. Every morning, identify 3 specific things you're genuinely grateful for. Different things each day to prevent habituation. Over time, this practice physically rewires your brain's default scanning mode, from scanning for threats to scanning for value. The negativity bias doesn't disappear, but it gets gradually outweighed by a new, equally automatic positivity bias that you've built deliberately. Optimistic rehearsal. Before important or challenging events, spend 3 to 5 minutes vividly imagining things going well. Not perfectly, well. See yourself handling challenges competently. See interactions going the way you genuinely like them to go. This is not denial, it's preparation. You're priming your brain to notice and create positive possibilities rather than defaulting to threat anticipation. Problem-solving practice. When you face any challenge, resist the immediate pull toward worry, and instead ask, what are 3 different ways I could approach this? Even for small problems, especially for small problems, because small problems are where you build the skill cheaply, so it's available for large problems when you need it. Cognitive flexibility training. When you notice yourself interpreting something negatively, deliberately generate 2 alternative interpretations. Not to dismiss the negative one, but to remind your brain that interpretations are choices, not facts. The more you practice this, the more naturally flexible your thinking becomes under pressure. Foundation 3. Emotional regulation mastery. Emotional regulation mastery is not the ability to avoid difficult emotions. It's the capacity to experience them fully, without being overwhelmed or controlled by them. This distinction matters enormously because many people, in their effort to think more positively, inadvertently develop a pattern of emotional suppression. They don't feel the difficult emotion. They perform not feeling it. And suppressed emotions don't dissolve. They accumulate. They resurface at inopportune moments with compound interest. Genuine emotional regulation involves what I call emotional surfing. The ability to ride difficult emotions the way a skilled surfer rides a wave. You don't fight the wave. You don't try to stop it. You acknowledge its power, position yourself skillfully, and let it carry you until it naturally subsides. In practice, this means when a difficult emotion arises, turn toward it with curiosity rather than resistance. Where do you feel it in your body? How does it change over time? What thoughts tend to accompany it? Give it space. Let it be present without amplifying it through resistance or collapsing into it through rumination. Here's the biological fact that makes this easier. Most emotional states, when not re-triggered by continued negative thinking, naturally complete their cycle in the body within approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds. What extends them for hours, days, or weeks is not the emotion itself. It's the story you keep telling yourself about the emotion, the rumination, the re-triggering, the resistance. Stop re-triggering it. Let the 90 seconds complete, and notice what happens on the other side. Foundation 4. Environmental optimization. Your physical and social environment has a profound impact on your mental patterns, often below the level of conscious awareness. Most people drastically underestimate this. Cluttered, chaotic, visually overwhelming spaces increase cortisol and amplify negative thinking. Ordered, calm, aesthetically considered spaces do the opposite. This is not interior design philosophy, it's environmental psychology, and the research on it is robust. You don't need a beautifully designed home to benefit from this principle. You need a space that you find calming and restorative. Declutter one area. Add one plant, one piece of art, one small change that makes the space feel more like a place where you can breathe. Notice the effect. Your social environment is equally, perhaps more, important. The people you spend the most time with are shaping your default thought patterns, your vocabulary for describing your experience, your sense of what's normal and what's possible. This doesn't mean cutting anyone out of your life who isn't perpetually positive. It means being intentional about the balance, gradually increasing time with people who challenge you constructively, who model the kind of thinking you want to develop, who make you feel more capable rather than more anxious, and gradually reducing the influence of people whose presence consistently leaves you more depleted, more cynical, or more caught in negative spirals. You are, in part, the average of the mental environments you inhabit. Choose them with more intention than most people do. Foundation 5. Purpose alignment. Of all the foundations of mental immunity, this one is the most powerful and the most frequently overlooked in conversations about mental health. When your daily activities are genuinely connected to something that matters to you, something that gives your effort a context larger than the effort itself, you become naturally more resilient to negative thinking, not because purpose makes the negative thoughts disappear, but because it changes their significance. Without purpose, a setback is just a setback. A failure is just a failure. A difficult period is just painful and pointless. With purpose, a setback is information on the path toward something that matters. A failure is a cost you're willing to pay for a goal that's worth it. A difficult period is a part of a story that's still being written. Purpose doesn't have to be grand or world-changing. The most durable forms of purpose are often intimate and specific, being a genuinely present parent, creating work that expresses something real about who you are, contributing to a community that you care about, helping people solve problems that you once struggled with yourself. Whatever your purpose is, clarify it, write it down, and regularly, deliberately, connect your daily experience to it. When you face a challenge or a negative thought, ask, how does navigating this serve what actually matters to me? That question transforms obstacles from meaningless friction into meaningful fuel. Part 4. Your mental freedom starts. Now we've covered a lot of ground together. You understand the architecture of the negative thought prison and why it feels so solid when it's actually made of mist. You understand the biology, why your brain defaults to negativity and why that default can be changed. You've done the honest accounting of what chronic negative thinking has cost you and what it will continue to cost if you leave it unchallenged. You have the complete reset protocol, 5 steps, backed by neuroscience, designed to be applied in real time with real thoughts. You know the advanced patterns that disguise themselves as logic and wisdom. You have emergency protocols for the moments when the wave has already broken, and you understand the 5 foundations of long-term mental immunity. That's not information. That's a complete system, and you now possess it. But here's the part I want to be genuinely honest with you about, because this is where most people's transformation stall, and I don't want that to be your story. The gap between knowing and doing right now, you feel something. Maybe it's motivation. Maybe it's a sense of clarity, of finally understanding something you've been circling around for a long time. Maybe it's the quiet recognition that this system, this approach, is actually what you've been looking for. That feeling is real. Honor it. And also, know that the feeling alone won't change anything. Here's what's going to happen after you finish reading this. If you're like most people, life will resume. The urgency of ordinary demands will reassert itself. The familiar patterns, the ones that have been running for years, the ones your nervous system knows better than it knows anything new, will feel more comfortable, more automatic, more like just the way things are, and gradually, without any dramatic decision to give up, the new information will fade into the background noise of things you know but don't do. Another book read, another insight filed, another opportunity for transformation that arrived and departed without quite taking root. I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm saying it because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort right now, and because the only thing standing between you and what this system can genuinely do for your life is the gap between knowing and doing. That gap is bridged by one thing: commitment expressed through specific action, not a vague intention to think more positively, not a general aspiration to be a more mentally healthy person, a specific, concrete, time-bound commitment. Here's the one I'm asking you to make right now. For the next 30 days, practice the reset protocol every single day. Not only when negative thoughts feel overwhelming, every day, including the ordinary days, the medium days, the days when things are fine, and the practice feels unnecessary, especially those days, because that's when you're building the neural pathways that will be available when you genuinely need them. Set a reminder on your phone. Put it where you'll see it. Tell someone what you're doing, not for accountability in a pressured sense, but because stating a commitment out loud makes it more neurologically real. Start today, not tomorrow, not when circumstances are more conducive. Today, with your next thought, with the next moment when you notice the familiar voice doing its familiar thing, and you choose consciously, deliberately, repeatedly to respond differently. The life on the other side, let me paint you one honest picture of what's waiting. Not a fantasy, not a promise that every day will feel easy or that you'll never struggle again. Just an accurate description of what actually changes when someone consistently applies this system over time. You wake up in the morning without that reflexive knot of anxiety that greets you before you've even fully arrived in consciousness. Your first thoughts aren't neutralized or suppressed. They're just different, more curious, more open, more oriented toward what's possible than what's threatening. You walk into challenging situations with a quiet steadiness, not the false confidence of someone performing certainty they don't feel, but the genuine groundedness of someone who knows that whatever arises, they have tools for it. The situation might still be hard, but hard and unmanageable are no longer the same thing. Your relationships deepen, not because dramatic conversations happen, but because you become more present. The presence gap closes. The people who matter to you start getting more of the actual you, rather than the distracted, half-absent version that your mental noise was producing. You start doing things you've been not doing, the conversations you've been avoiding, the opportunities you've been talking yourself out of, the projects that have been living in the waiting room of someday when I feel ready. You discover that readiness in most cases was never going to arrive on its own. It was always going to have to be chosen. And somewhere along the way, not dramatically, not all at once, but unmistakably, you notice that the voice has gotten quieter, not silent, but quieter, less authoritative, less able to pass itself off as truth. You hear it, you recognize it, you examine it briefly, and then, more often than not, you simply don't follow it. That's mental freedom, not the absence of negative thoughts, the absence of their tyranny. One final thing. You've lived inside the noise long enough. You know what it costs. You know what it takes. You know what it prevents. You also now know something more important. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who can observe them, examine them, interrupt them, and replace them with something that actually serves the life you want to live. That's not a small thing. That's everything. The reset protocol is not a quick fix in the sense of being easy or requiring no effort. It's a quick fix in the sense that it actually works. And it works faster than you probably believe is possible right now. Your brain is plastic. Your patterns are changeable. Your mental future is not determined by your mental past. The work begins with your next thought. The life you want begins with the decision made right now, renewed every morning, honored every time you remember to honor it, to be the one who chooses what gets to run in the space between your ears. You've been giving that space away for free for too long. It's time to take it back. Real scenarios, real application, how to use your new mental system in the situations that matter most. Here's something I want you to understand before we dive in. The reset protocol is not a technique you apply in a vacuum. It's not something you practice in ideal conditions and then hope it somehow transfers to the messy, complicated, emotionally charged situations that make up actual life. Real mental transformation happens in real moments, in the middle of difficult conversations, in the quiet dread of Sunday evenings, in the physical tension of a job interview, in the loneliness of 3 a.m., when the thoughts are loudest and the tools feel furthest away. This chapter is your playbook for exactly those moments. We're going to walk through 8 specific life scenarios, the ones that show up most consistently for people who are serious about personal growth and mental mastery. For each scenario, we'll identify the specific negative thought patterns that tend to dominate and then apply the reset protocol with the precision and personalization that makes the difference between theory and transformation. Keep this chapter, return to it, use it as a reference when you're in the middle of a hard moment and need a clear, specific guide for that exact situation. This is where the system meets your actual life. Scenario 1, the Sunday night spiral, when the week ahead feels like a weight you're already carrying. You know this one. It's Sunday evening. The weekend is winding down. There's a particular quality to the light. Or maybe it's just something in the air, and your mind starts its weekly performance of everything that could go wrong in the next 5 days. The meetings you're dreading, the conversations you've been avoiding, the tasks that have been quietly accumulating, the sense that you're already behind before the week has even begun, the low-grade dread that settles somewhere in your chest and refuses to leave. Sunday night anxiety has its own specific flavor, and it's one of the most common, most reliable negative thought patterns that high-functioning people experience. Recognizing it has a name, a structure, and a solution is the first step to stopping it from stealing what remains of your weekend. The dominant negative patterns. Here, the Sunday spiral typically runs on a combination of anticipatory anxiety, everything coming up feels threatening, comparative thinking, other people seem to handle this without falling apart, and catastrophizing, this week is going to be overwhelming. It also frequently involves perfectionist thinking, the sense that you should be more organized, more prepared, more on top of things than you feel. Apply and reset. Recognize. The physical signature of Sunday anxiety is distinctive. A tightening in the upper chest, shallow breathing, a restlessness, the inability to fully settle into whatever you're doing because your mind keeps pulling toward Monday. Notice these sensations. Name them. This is Sunday anxiety. This is a pattern, not a prophecy. Examine, apply the truth test. What are the actual facts right now, in this moment? You have a week ahead. Some of it will be challenging, some of it will be fine, some of it will be better than expected. The fear-based addition is the assumption that the challenging parts will be unmanageable, and the evidence for that is precisely zero, because the week hasn't happened yet. Apply the 5-year test. Will the specific things you're dreading right now matter in 5 years? In most cases, honestly, no. They're real and they require attention, but they are not defining. They are not catastrophic. They are just a week. Stop, reset, now. Power breath. In through the nose, hold 3 seconds, out through the mouth with a real audible exhale. Follow it with a physical reset. Stand up, roll your shoulders back, shake your hands loose. Break the physical pattern of Sunday tension before it calcifies into Sunday dread. Exchange. Replace the spiral with something from your exchange library. Some powerful options for Sunday anxiety. I have handled every week that has come before this one. My track record of getting through hard weeks is 100%. I don't need to solve next week right now. Right now, I only need to be here. Preparation is useful. Preemptive suffering is not. I can do one and skip the other. Transform. Take the exchange thought and embody it. Sit up straighter. Take a slow breath and let your chest expand. See yourself moving through the week with competence, not perfectly, but capably. Feel the difference between the contracted, braced posture of anxiety and the open, grounded posture of someone who trusts their own ability to handle what comes. Then do one small concrete thing that converts anxious energy into useful action. Write down the 3 most important tasks for Monday. Just 3. Not the whole week, just Monday's 3. That single act of concrete. Organization does something anxiety cannot. It gives your mind something real to hold on to instead of something imagined to fear. Scenario 2, the comparison trap. When someone else's highlight reel becomes your evidence of inadequacy. You're scrolling, or you're in a conversation, or you're at a gathering where someone mentions what a mutual acquaintance is achieving, has built, or has become, and something happens in your chest. A slight contraction, a quiet, uncomfortable voice that starts doing math you didn't ask it to do. They're my age, and look at what they've accomplished. I should be further along by now. Everyone seems to know what they're doing except me. The comparison trap is insidious precisely because it feels like honest self-assessment. It feels like you're just being realistic, looking at the evidence and drawing reasonable conclusions. But you're not. You're looking at a carefully curated fraction of someone else's experience and comparing it to the full, unedited, behind-the-scenes version of your own. That comparison is not just unfair, it's structurally impossible to make accurately. And yet your brain runs it automatically dozens of times a day and then presents you with the results as if they mean something. The dominant negative patterns. Here, comparative negativity combined with historical negativity, I've always been like this, and disguised negativity. I just want to be realistic about where I am. Applying reset, recognize. Comparison thoughts have a distinctive emotional signature, a specific blend of inadequacy and urgency. The inadequacy says, I'm not enough. The urgency says, and I'm running out of time. Together, they create a particular kind of shame anxiety that is physically uncomfortable and motivationally paralyzing. Notice this combination. Name it. This is the comparison pattern. This is not truth. This is trigger. Examine. Evidence. Evaluation. Applied honestly. What do you actually know about the person you're comparing yourself to? You know their outcomes. You know their visible achievements. You know what they've chosen to share. You do not know their private struggles, their doubts, their 3 a.m. moments, their failures that didn't make it into the narrative, their cost, what it took, what they sacrificed, what they're still working through privately. You're comparing your complete picture to their highlights package. Those are not comparable data sets. Also apply the alternative explanation exercise to your own situation. If you're not as far along as you think you should be, what are the alternative explanations beyond "I'm inadequate"? What have you been doing with your time and energy that doesn't show up in easily visible metrics? What have you been building, learning, navigating, enduring? What's different about your path that makes the comparison genuinely inapplicable? Stop, reset, now. Physical reset. If you're on your phone, put it down and press your feet into the floor. If you're in a social setting, excuse yourself for 2 minutes and step outside or to a bathroom. Break the environmental loop that's feeding the pattern. Exchange. The most powerful exchange thoughts for comparative negativity work by redirecting your attention from other people's paths to your own. My path is not a slower version of someone else's path. It's a different path entirely. Comparison is information about my aspirations, not evidence about my inadequacy. The only timeline that matters is the one I'm actually on. Transform. Embody this with a specific physical gesture of self-acknowledgement. Place one hand on your chest, genuinely, not performatively, and think of one specific thing you've done recently that was hard, that required something real from you, that you don't give yourself credit for. Let it be small. Let it be ordinary. Let it be real. Your growth is real even when it's invisible to the metrics other people are measuring. Scenario 3. The pre-performance freeze. When anxiety shows up right before you need to perform. The presentation is in 10 minutes. The interview starts in an hour. The difficult conversation is tonight. The creative work is due tomorrow, and you haven't started yet, because the thought of starting has been producing a specific, reliable paralysis. Pre-performance anxiety is one of the most universally experienced forms of negative thinking, and one of the most practically disruptive, because it arrives precisely when you most need your brain to be functioning at its best. The physiological stress response that anxiety triggers, the cortisol surge, the narrowed focus, the threat mode activation, is almost exactly the opposite of the mental state that produces excellent performance. Your brain, in its misguided attempt to protect you from the threat of failing, puts you in a state that makes failure more likely. This is the cruelest version of the stress paradox. The dominant negative. Patterns. Here, performance anxiety combined with imposter syndrome. I'm going to be exposed as not knowing what I'm doing. Perfectionist negativity. I need to be flawless, or this doesn't count. And catastrophizing. If this goes badly, the consequences will be severe and permanent. Applying reset. Recognize. Pre-performance anxiety lives in your body as much as your mind. Hands that won't quite stay still. A stomach that feels unsettled. A quality of mental scatteredness. Too many thoughts at once, none of them fully forming. Heart rate slightly elevated. voice in your head running a loop of worst-case scenarios. Recognize all of this. Name it. This is pre-performance anxiety. This is my body preparing for something it thinks is dangerous. The danger isn't real, but the preparation is happening anyway. Examine. Apply the truth test with precision. What is the actual worst realistic outcome here? Not the catastrophic fantasy, but the genuinely realistic worst case? And if that realistic worst case happened, would you survive it? Would you learn from it? Would it actually end anything important? In the vast majority of cases, the honest answer to all three questions is yes, yes, and no. Then apply the helpfulness assessment. Is running the worst-case scenario for the 47th time helping you prepare better? Or is it consuming the mental resources you actually need to perform? Stop. Stop. Reset. Now. The power breath here is especially important because the physical anxiety response needs a physical interruption before the mental techniques can land. Take 3 power breaths in sequence. Feel your nervous system begin to recalibrate. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Give your body permission to come out of emergency mode. Exchange. Pre-performance exchange. Thoughts need to be grounded in competence and preparation, not fantasy outcomes. I have prepared for this. My preparation is real, even when my confidence feels shaky. I don't need to be perfect. I need to show up and give what I have. That's enough. Nervous energy is just excitement that hasn't been labeled yet. I'm not afraid. I'm ready. That last one is particularly powerful, and it's supported by research. The physiological signature of anxiety and the physiological signature of excitement are nearly identical. The difference is interpretation. Choosing to interpret pre-performance activation as excitement rather than fear genuinely changes performance outcomes, not as a trick, as a genuine reframe of what your body is doing. Transform. 2 minutes before you begin, wherever you are, whatever is possible in that space, stand in an open, expansive posture. Feet shoulder-width apart, shoulders back, chest open, head level. Take 1 slow, full breath. Say quietly, but with conviction, I'm ready, I'm prepared, let's go, then go. Scenario 4, the relationship rumination loop. When you replay conversations and rewrite endings, that already happened, something happened in a relationship, a conversation that didn't go the way you wanted, a moment of disconnection, something said or unsaid that has taken up residence in your mind and won't leave. And now you're replaying it again and again, trying different versions, imagining different responses, running the whole thing on a loop while accomplishing precisely nothing except exhausting yourself and amplifying the original wound. Relationship rumination is one of the most energy-intensive forms of negative thinking and one of the least productive because it's focused almost entirely on something you cannot change, the past. The conversation already happened. The moment has already passed. No amount of mental replay will alter it, and yet the replay continues. Because your brain, operating in threat detection mode, has flagged this as an unresolved situation, a potential danger to a relationship that matters. And it keeps returning to it the way your tongue keeps returning to a sore tooth, involuntarily, insistently, unhelpfully. The dominant negative patterns. Here, historical negativity. I always mess up important conversations. Catastrophizing, this might have permanently damaged the relationship. And what I call the perfectionist replay. The conviction that there was a right thing to say and you said the wrong thing, and now everything is different. Applying reset. Recognize relationship rumination has a particular quality of circular closed-loop thinking. You notice you're thinking about the same incident for the third, fifth, 10th time. You notice the thoughts aren't generating new insights. They're just replaying with slight variations. You notice the emotional tone is consistent. Low-grade guilt, anxiety, or sadness that doesn't resolve regardless of how long you spend with it. Recognize this as rumination. Name it explicitly. I am ruminating. This is not problem solving. This is not processing. This is a loop that is costing me without benefiting me. Examine. Apply the 5-year test. Will this specific conversation in 5 years be the thing you look back on as the moment a relationship changed? In most cases, honestly, no. Relationships are built from thousands of interactions. They are not defined by single moments, no matter how much your ruminating brain insists that they are. Apply the alternative explanation exercise to the other person's behavior and response. What are the most generous, most realistic interpretations of what happened? What might they have been experiencing that had nothing to do with you? What evidence do you have that the relationship is actually damaged versus your anxiety telling you it might be? Stop, reset, now. For relationship rumination specifically, the attention redirect is particularly important because the loop is so self-reinforcing that mental techniques alone sometimes struggle to interrupt it. Use the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding exercise fully. Force your attention into your immediate sensory environment. Break the internal loop with external anchoring. Exchange. The most useful exchange thoughts for relationship rumination redirect from the past toward the present and forward. I cannot change what was said. I can influence what comes next. One difficult conversation is not the story of this relationship. It's one page in a long book. The most useful thing I can do right now is show up well going forward, not replay what's already done. Transform. If the situation genuinely requires action, an apology, a clarifying conversation, a gesture of reconnection, identify one specific small action you can take today. Not tomorrow. Today. Converting rumination into action is one of the most effective pattern interrupts available because it gives the anxious energy somewhere real to go. If no action is needed, if the honest answer is that you're ruminating about something that doesn't actually require a response, then physically close the loop. Write the situation down on a piece of paper. Then write one sentence about what, if anything, you'd do differently. Then fold the paper and put it away. The physical act of writing and closing creates a sense of cognitive completion that the endless mental loop never achieves. Scenario 5. The financial fear spiral. When money worries take over everything else. Financial stress is a category of negative thinking that requires especially careful handling. Because unlike some other triggers, financial concerns are often connected to genuinely real practical situations. You can't reset your bank balance into non-existence. You can't exchange a real financial pressure for a positive thought and watch it dissolve. What you can do, what you absolutely must do, is separate the real practical situation from the catastrophic mental narrative that your brain tends to construct around it, because those are two different things, and the mental narrative, left unchecked, causes damage that goes far beyond what the actual financial situation warrants. The dominant negative patterns. Here, catastrophizing, this will never get better, historical negativity, I've always been bad with money, and logical negativity, I'm just being realistic about how bad things are. Also frequently, shame-based thinking, the belief that financial struggle is evidence of fundamental personal inadequacy. Applying reset, recognize. Financial anxiety has a distinctive somatic quality, a heaviness in the stomach, a tightness in the chest, a cognitive narrowing where money thoughts crowd out almost everything else. Recognize when you've crossed from productive financial planning into financial anxiety spiral. The distinction: planning feels focused and moves toward action. Anxiety spirals feel circular and move toward paralysis. Examine. Apply the truth test with particular precision here. Separate what is factually true about your financial situation from what your anxiety is projecting about your financial future. The facts might be challenging, but the projection, the story your brain tells about where those facts lead, is almost certainly worse than reality. Apply the helpfulness assessment. Is the amount of mental energy you're spending on financial worry proportional to any useful action it's generating? If the worry is not producing a plan, it's not planning. It's just suffering. Stop. Reset. Now. Financial anxiety tends to be physically held in the gut, so the physical reset should focus there. Take the power breath and direct your exhale consciously toward releasing the tension in your stomach and solar plexus. Feel the physical component of the anxiety and give it a physical release. Exchange. Financial exchange thoughts must walk the line between genuine empowerment and false reassurance. The goal is not to pretend things are fine when they're not. It's to reconnect with your agency and your capacity. My financial situation is where it is right now. What it becomes next is influenced by my choices going forward. I am capable of learning what I need to know to improve this situation. Financial difficulty is a circumstance. It is not an identity. It is not permanent. It is not the whole story. Transform. The most powerful transformation step for financial anxiety is converting the anxious energy into one specific, concrete financial action, however small. Look at one number, make one call. Research one option. Write down one thing you can do this week that moves toward financial clarity. Anxiety thrives in vagueness. Specificity is its antidote. The moment you have one clear next step, the spiral loses its grip. Because now you're not just a person being consumed by financial fear. You're a person taking a financial action. That's a completely different identity. And identities drive behavior. Scenario 6, the imposter syndrome ambush, when your achievements feel like a lie. You're about to be caught in. You've worked for this. You've earned it. The position, the role, the responsibility, the recognition. It came because of your effort, your skill, your persistence by any rational measure. You belong here. And yet, there's a voice that knows differently. That voice says, you've been fooling people, that your success is a kind of elaborate misunderstanding that is eventually, inevitably, going to be corrected. That one day, maybe today, maybe in this meeting, maybe when you open your mouth to contribute, someone is going to see through the performance and discover that you are not, in fact, what everyone has been assuming you are. This is imposter syndrome, and it is one of the most prevalent, most disruptive, and most democratically distributed forms of negative thinking among high-achieving, growth-oriented people. Research suggests that up to 70% of people experience it at some point, including people who are, by any external measure, extraordinarily accomplished, which means if you experience imposter syndrome, you are in exceptionally good company. The dominant negative patterns. Here, disguised negativity, I'm just being humble and realistic, authority wall thinking, my inner critic knows the truth about me that others don't, and perfectionist negativity. One mistake will expose the whole fraud. Applying reset, recognize. Imposter syndrome has a particular cognitive signature, a disconnect between external evidence and internal experience. External evidence says you belong here. Internal experience insists you don't. The gap between those two creates a specific kind of cognitive dissonance, a chronic, low-grade sense of being about to be found out. Notice when this gap is present, name it. This is imposter syndrome. This is a pattern, not a perception. Examine. Evidence evaluation. Applied rigorously. What is the actual evidence that you don't belong where you are? Not the feeling, the evidence. Who told you? What specifically happened that supports the conclusion that your presence here is fraudulent? In virtually all cases of imposter syndrome, the honest answer is the evidence doesn't exist. What exists is a feeling, a subjective experience of inadequacy that exists independently of objective reality. Your brain is generating a narrative, not reporting on facts. That's a crucial distinction. Also, apply the alternative explanation exercise to your own achievements. If you have succeeded at something, alternative explanations beyond, I got lucky or I fooled people. You prepared thoroughly. You worked consistently. You solved real problems. You built real skills. You showed up repeatedly when it was difficult. These are not things that happen by accident. Stop, reset, now. Imposter syndrome often creates a particular physical pattern, a kind of making yourself smaller, rounded shoulders, slightly contracted chest, voice that softens and qualifies unnecessarily. The physical reset here should be deliberately expansive. Roll your shoulders back firmly, lift your chin, take up slightly more space than your anxiety is telling you to take. Exchange. Imposter syndrome. Exchange thoughts work best when they're grounded in contribution rather than performance. I don't need to be the most qualified person in the room. I need to contribute what I actually have, and what I have is real. I was given this opportunity because someone saw something in me that was real. My job is to show up, not to justify their decision. Everyone in every room is figuring things out as they go. I am not uniquely unprepared. I am human. Transform. Create what I call a credibility anchor, a specific concrete list of 3 to 5 genuine accomplishments that you know beyond reasonable doubt reflect your actual capability, not things you got lucky with, things you worked for, things that required something real from you. Keep this list accessible. Return to it when imposter syndrome strikes, not to brag, not to perform, but to anchor yourself in evidence when the feeling is drowning out the facts. Scenario 7. The health anxiety loop. When every symptom becomes a catastrophe. Before the doctor weighs in, you notice something. A headache that's lasted a day longer than usual. A physical sensation you don't recognize. A result on a routine test that the internet has just informed you could mean approximately 47 different things, ranging from mildly insignificant to genuinely alarming. And your mind, with its extraordinary threat detection machinery, immediately begins constructing the worst-case scenario. and then defending that scenario against all competing interpretations, and then building a complete narrative around it that includes how things will unfold, what it will mean, and how you'll manage what's coming. All of this, usually, before you've spoken to a single medical professional. Health. Anxiety is a specific and particularly difficult category of negative thinking because, unlike most other negative thought triggers, health concerns are sometimes real. You cannot always apply the reset protocol and conclude that the thought is purely anxiety with no factual basis. Sometimes symptoms do require attention. Sometimes concerns are legitimate. The skill here is not dismissing health concerns. It's learning to distinguish between the signal, the actual symptom or concern that warrants attention, and the noise, the catastrophic narrative your anxiety constructs around that signal. The dominant negative patterns. Here, catastrophizing, the worst-case interpretation is the most likely one. Logical negativity, I'm just being thorough in considering all possibilities. And the internet research spiral, the compulsive search for information that consistently makes health anxiety worse rather than better. Applying reset. Recognize health anxiety has a specific cognitive pattern, a binary of either complete reassurance or worst-case confirmation. Your brain, in health anxiety mode, is not looking for accurate information. It's looking for either a guarantee that everything is fine, which medicine almost never provides, or confirmation that its worst fears are justified. The middle ground of this is uncertain and probably manageable, is almost impossible for anxious health thinking to accept. Recognize when you're in this pattern. Notice the obsessive quality, the need to keep checking, keep researching, keep seeking the reassurance that never fully satisfies. That quality is the signal that you're in health anxiety, not in productive health management. Examine. Apply the truth test carefully. Separate what is factually known, the specific symptom or finding, from what is being assumed. Then apply the helpfulness assessment. Is continued research and worst-case construction helping you make better health decisions? Or is it increasing your cortisol while you wait for a medical opinion that will be more accurate than anything you'll find in an online forum? Stop, reset. Now, set a specific, time-limited boundary around health research. If you've been looking something up for more than 15 minutes, stop. Not because the question doesn't matter, but because at that point, the research is feeding anxiety, not informing decisions. The power breath is especially useful here. It creates a physiological interruption that can break the compulsive research loop. Exchange. Health anxiety. Exchange thoughts need to acknowledge the legitimacy of the concern while redirecting to appropriate action. I have a concern. The appropriate response to a concern is to get accurate medical information, not to self-diagnose online. My body is generally resilient and well-designed. Most symptoms resolve. Most concerns, when properly evaluated, are manageable. I can take one clear action, schedule an appointment, make a call, and then practice trusting the process. Transform. The transformation step for health anxiety is particularly concrete. Take the one action that is actually useful, and then stop. Make the appointment. Send the message. Do the thing that moves you toward accurate information. Then redirect your attention to something fully present and engaging until you have that information. The one action converts anxiety into agency. And agency, however small, is the most effective antidote to the helplessness that drives health anxiety's worst spirals. Scenario 8. The 3 a.m. thought ambush. When your brain chooses darkness and quiet to run its loudest programs. It's the middle of the night. Everything is still. And your brain, having apparently been waiting for exactly this moment, this combination of darkness, quiet, and the particular vulnerability of a half-sleeping mind, decides that now is the perfect time to present you with every unresolved concern, every past mistake, every future uncertainty, every relationship complication, every financial worry, and every existential question it has been queuing up all day. The 3 a.m. thought ambush is its own category of negative thinking experience, and it requires its own specific approach because the conditions are different from daytime negative thinking in important ways. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational, executive, perspective-taking part of your brain, is less active at 3 a.m. than during the day. Your emotional brain, the part that generates and amplifies threat responses, is less inhibited by rational oversight, which means the thoughts feel more real, more urgent, and more definitive than they actually are. The problem that seems catastrophic and unsolvable at 3 a.m. is almost never catastrophic and unsolvable at 9 a.m. This is a biological fact, not a platitude. The 3 a.m. experience of your problems is not an accurate report on your problems, the dominant negative patterns. Here, amplification wall thinking, one worry cascading into many, catastrophizing, because everything feels larger in the dark, and historical negativity. The nighttime is especially good at retrieving evidence of past failures. Applying, reset, recognize. The 3 a.m. experience has a distinctive quality of unreality. Thoughts feel simultaneously more urgent and more circular than they do in daylight. Recognize this context explicitly. It is the middle of the night. My brain's regulatory capacity is reduced. The intensity of these thoughts is partly a function of the time, not purely a function of the actual situation. This single recognition, naming the context, can take significant power out of the nighttime spiral. Examine. Apply the 5-year test with particular deliberateness. Then add the time of day test. Would this feel as catastrophic and unsolvable at 10 a.m. tomorrow as it does right now? In almost all cases, the honest answer is no. The problem may still be real, but the felt sense of its weight, its permanence, and its unsolvability is being amplified by neurological conditions specific to the middle of the night. Stop, reset. Now, the physical reset for 3 a.m. needs to be adapted for the context. You're in bed. You don't want to fully wake yourself up, and large physical movements are counterproductive. Use a modified power breath. Breathe in slowly. Hold for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 8 seconds. The extended exhale specifically activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Do this 5 times, counting backward from 5 with each breath. If the thoughts are particularly intense, get up briefly, not to engage with devices or further stimulation, but simply to change your physical environment. A glass of water, a few minutes sitting somewhere other than where you've been lying. The physical interruption can break the loop more effectively than continuing to lie in the dark, trying to think your way out. Exchange. 3. A.M. exchange. Thoughts should be gentle, grounding, and deliberately non-urgent. These thoughts feel important right now. They will look different in the morning. I don't need to solve anything at 3 a.m. My only job right now is to rest. I have gotten through every difficult night that came before this one. Transform. Keep a small notebook by your bed specifically for 3 a.m. thoughts. When something feels pressing, write it down. One sentence. The act of writing externalizes the thought, which reduces the pressure your brain feels to keep holding it actively in consciousness. You've recorded it. It won't be lost. Your brain can, with practice, learn to accept this as sufficient and release the thought enough to return to sleep. Then use the extended exhale breath until sleep returns, not as a performance of relaxation, as a genuine physiological intervention that your body, given the chance, will respond to. Closing the playbook 8 scenarios, 8 specific applications of the same fundamental system. Different triggers, different thought patterns, different nuances, but the same underlying architecture. Recognize, examine, stop, exchange, transform. What I want you to notice across all 8 of these scenarios is something important. The reset protocol is not a rigid script. It's a flexible framework that you adapt to the specific conditions of each situation. The steps are consistent. The application is personalized. You are not the same person in all of these scenarios. You're dealing with different emotions, different stakes, different levels of physiological activation. The protocol meets you where you are, and its job is to give you traction, not perfection. Some applications will be quick and clean. Recognize, one breath, exchange thought, done. Other applications will require more deliberate work, more time in the examined step, a more intensive physical reset, more careful cultivation of the right exchange thought. Both are valid. Both are the system working. What matters is that you use it consistently in the real situations of your real life, not as an emergency measure for your worst days, but as a daily practice that gradually, measurably, permanently changes the quality of your default thinking. This playbook is yours. Return to it, add to it. Your own scenarios, your own specific negative thought patterns, your own most powerful exchange thoughts. Make it as personal and as precise as your actual life requires, because that's ultimately what all of this comes down to. Not a general aspiration to think more positively, but a specific, practiced, personalized system for maintaining mental freedom in the exact situations where it matters most. You have the system, you have the playbook, you have the biology, the understanding, and the tools. The rest is practice, and practice, real, consistent, imperfect, showing up anyway practice, is where freedom actually lives. Stop, reset, now, and then keep going.